Hello and welcome to the Understanding Narcissists YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me. This episode is going to be all about narcissistic people. I have touched on this topic before, briefly. And the reason it's brief is because it's not particularly relevant to narcissism, believe it or not. And the what I mean by that is there are narcissists who conform to all the behaviors I describe in these videos for the most part in some fashion or another. And yet, there is a class of people, a larger class or group of people, that do not exhibit all of the symptoms but exhibit some of them. It is my opinion that these people are not narcissists and much harder to describe accurately in the sweeping way that I describe narcissists. Now, the reason being, of course, is because they're not as dysfunctional. I'm not saying they don't do destructive, dysfunctional things, but they are not narcissists. The conformity to the pattern of behavior is simply not present. However, they have narcissistic traits and narcissistic tendencies that they use to express problems, personal problems, and things that are not directly causal to narcissism. I guess what I'm trying to say is they're people, and so there could be any number of things going on with them that are not going to fit the pattern I describe on this channel. That's why that's not a particularly relevant subject, and yet it's a very important subject because as you go through life, you're going to encounter these people as well. And they can cause a lot of harm and destruction. And the great difficulty is, because they're not what I would call true narcissists, things can be just as upended by them, by their own work, their own handiwork, their own hand. But you may not be able to figure it out because there's no holistic way of figuring it out, because there can be so much that differentiates them from narcissists, even though they do narcissistic things. Now, aside from the narcissistic things that you can pinpoint, you're also fortunate in the fact that because they're not narcissists, they don't have the gloomy prognosis that all narcissists have, which is they're only going to get worse, they'll never get better, they're always going to hurt you, they're always going to be trying to get you back under their thumb. A lot of narcissistic people may not fall into that category. It's not as holistic. The illusion is not, I don't want to say not present, but not as apparent, not as present, not as strong. That goes back to the conformity concept. They don't have as strong urges to work within that framework. They don't have to. And yet, they will still do things along those same lines. So there's an unpredictability to it, because they're not as predictable as narcissists. And yet, they're probably not going to be, I don't want to say as harmful. It's not that they can't be as destructive. They're just not as continually harmful. These are dysfunctional people, but they've got any number of things going on, not related to narcissism necessarily. And so therein lies the difficulty in describing them. But I want to be as clear as I possibly can in saying that you will encounter people who do things the way I describe in these videos, who are manipulative, who are subversive, who try to compromise your ego, who manipulate people. But they may not do it to the degree and with the absolute frequency and regularity of a real narcissist. And they may be able to recognize it as such. They may be able to recognize that it's a fault of theirs and they have a problem that they have to deal with, but they may not get that far. And so there's a lot of variation within this group. There's still a spectrum, degrees of intensity within this group. So that kind of begs the question, why bother with this topic in the first place? Well, as I say, it's not particularly relevant, but it's still relevant, and it's still a question that has to be answered, because by and large, this is the kind of stuff you're going to encounter in your day-to-day life. There's no getting around it. This kind of thing is just everywhere. The narcissism I've described, the extreme narcissism I've described in these videos, really correlates with extreme narcissists. The reason I do that is so that you get the whole shebang. You get all of it, so that you have a really deep understanding of what narcissism is really about, so then you can then apply it in many different ways in defending yourself from it within your own life. You would think that the extreme narcissism wouldn't be relevant, but it's really just concentrated. It's just as relevant to everything before it, lesser narcissism or just narcissistic people, as it is to extreme narcissists. I find that if you don't understand extreme, true narcissists, you don't have a comprehensive view of everything. With an extreme narcissist, you get the very essence of what narcissism is all about, and maybe what's causing it, what's driving them to those behaviors internally, what happened to them, and what you can learn from that. If I were just to go into some kind of mishmash of narcissistic traits, but not in a holistic way, in a really deep way, it wouldn't really cover anything. It certainly wouldn't cover narcissists, because you wouldn't get an idea of the intensity of narcissism within real narcissists, and you really wouldn't even understand narcissistic traits. So you can understand narcissistic people in the context of narcissism, but not all of it is going to apply. So it's not a clear roadmap, but you still get a feel for how things work. You'll still recognize it. So the individual bits and pieces that somebody may exhibit within the realm of narcissism, while not being narcissists themselves, will still be relevant. It'll just be lighter. As I had someone who wrote to me describe it, narcissist light. I kind of like that term. And it's more complicated because they're not narcissists, and so there's going to be a bunch of other moving parts you're not familiar with. So it's really a demarcation problem. And I can't give you all the answers there because I don't have them. This is a group which is extremely diverse, and it really, the problem with it too is that it shows how narcissistic traits can trickle down to people, to the enablers themselves, who can exhibit narcissistic traits without being narcissists at all. Now, generally speaking, enablers are narcissistic in the presence of narcissists or in support of narcissists, because the illusion is narcissism. It's narcissistic. And so, if you're going to be supporting that wholeheartedly, you're going to be narcissistic in the process. It's just kind of a stipulation, a demand of supporting an illusion. And that's something you can use to simplify kind of your analysis. But that's just with enablers. With narcissistic people, you might have somebody who's been abused, who has been around a narcissist, or had some of the, what you may call, origins of a narcissist, the same kind of patterns of stimuli, of behavior, the environment they adapted to, so they become narcissistic, but they're not really narcissists. And they did develop into functional human beings. What happens there is, as they say, a lot of moving parts. So they may be narcissistic in one way that you think, oh my goodness, but then it doesn't really fit together in a whole narcissistic scheme. Now, I'm confident that there is a line. I shouldn't say confident. I think there's a line between narcissists and non-narcissists. I never see anybody straddling that line. They're on one side or they're on the other. They're narcissists or they aren't. That may not turn out to be true. However, It's not an underlying assumption in these videos, but it's definitely something I take into account when I'm recording and thinking about these videos and delivering this content to you. If it turns out to not be the case, I don't think everything will fall apart. So it's not a foundational principle I'm assuming is true. I'm not presuming on it. But I feel like it is very suggestive that there are narcissists and non-narcissists. So within the realm of narcissists, they exhibit all of the behaviors I describe in some form or another. They can adapt them in their own way, within their own illusion, but they're going to have an illusion. Period. It's just going to be there. They're going to self-victimize. Period. It's just going to be there. Now, there's tons of other people, groups of people, that self-victimize to manipulate others, but they may not be narcissists. But they have to have an illusion along with that in order to be narcissists. So I think you kind of get where I'm going with this, which is it all has to be there, working together, working in tandem, and including the contradictions. That's probably one of the biggest things. There are manipulative people who self-victimize, but may be relatively clear-headed about it. I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying they're not narcissists. Now, they may be narcissistic. Maybe they aren't, but they may be narcissistic. But a lot of the deep, driving contradictions that build up that angst and worry in narcissists that I can argue about in a different video, because some people take that up with me as not being the case. But I think they're very anxious. And whatever's driving that, whatever's bubbling up, you may not see that in a narcissistic person. So something is absent. Hence, they're not really narcissists. There's a lot of breakdown. Now, as far as the allocation of traits, what traits they can have, what traits are incompatible in order for somebody to be a narcissistic person, I couldn't really tell you. I'd have to think about it. This is a difficult and sticky subject. And very useful. But it's hard to work through. And it's something you kind of have to piece together by yourself on a case-by-case basis. These are not narcissists. The prognosis, the long-term outlook, does not hold for them, necessarily. Could be the same, may not be. Therefore, it is necessary for me to leave all of that open-ended and not drop any bombs here or big declarative claims as to what they can do and what they can't do, because I simply can't. Just let it be known that there is a mix of people who you will see these traits within, but not everything will hold up. Now, I will say it's pretty easy. Once you get used to narcissists and you start to get narcissists kind of in your head, how they work, kind of emulated in your mind, it's pretty easy to distinguish them, because narcissists really are ironclad. They kind of just march in this formation. They try to conceal it, but they're always doing the same thing. They're always doing the exact same thing. They're always at work. It's always, that wheel is always turning. And therefore, when you notice that somebody's narcissistic, but the wheel's not always turning, they're not always working to that end, they have more things in their life than just controlling people, it's a good chance they're not narcissists, because narcissists are just not like that. Anyway, I hope this video sheds some light on a very neglected topic. I hope you liked this video. Like it if you do. Share it with somebody you think might benefit from it. Comment in the comment section below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye.